I think of excise taxes as sin taxes. So if you like to smoke and if you like to drink, presumably it might have some effect on your health and somebody has to pay for the healthcare costs. So if the theory is that the consumer should be able to bear the burden, then the person who smokes and the person who drinks should contribute to those healthcare costs, in my opinion. As Andrew also alluded to, in 2008, the government did propose a monthly subscription on post and prepaid mobile phone use, which proved, I think, almost impossible to implement. So we'll see if the excise taxes could be implemented on airtime as maybe, as Andrew said, the IMF can show us how to do it. I do believe that there are some allowances and allowances, I should say, and deductions in the Income Tax Act that could be eliminated. So there is some rationale, I think, for simplifying the income tax. There's some concessions in there that, in my experience, have never been used or have rarely been used. I also do believe that the discretionary powers granted under CAP 67B, which is the legislation under which they're granted, is somewhat wide, and there should be some transparency in the entire process. And as Andrew said, under the WTO rules, we do have to look at a lot of our taxes to make sure that they're compliant. I think Barbados had agreed to do so by 2015. So the Fiscal Incentives Act, I believe, will be phased out, which is the legislation that grants certain concessions to manufacturers. Andrew touched on the concept of converting allowances to a tax credit. And if you want to know how much that will hurt your pocket, it will be $4,375. So this will be a burden on the middle class who are already bearing the brunt of the consolidation tax. Speaking of the consolidation tax, the IMF did allude to the fact that this has some severe weakness in the way in which it was applied, in that the rate of tax is applied to the entire band. It's not a scale, so to speak. So people who are on the boundaries of one band could be disadvantaged considerably, and it has led to some anomalies for those taxpayers. But all in all, there are some proposals I do believe that the government should consider taking into account.
It's for an introduction to these taxes. It is one that is a bit hard for me to swallow as an economist, and even with my other hat as a financial analyst. And the reason why is that most of these taxes are actually quite, let's say, counter-cyclical. All right? Meaning that taxes like these tend to benefit the medium term for the society, the economy at large, only when you're on the upswing. So, I mean, for instance, removing investment incentives, I do not, and I categorically will say this, Andrew, since you threw this out to me, I do not agree with removing incentives, okay? Especially investment-driven incentives, particularly when the recovery that Barbados should expect will be driven on investment. Tax rationalization is good. The government always had a structural issue from as far back as the BLP to as current as the DLP with tax administration. Now the issue that's probably 20 years too late is being addressed. So with that being said, many of these would not necessarily solve the government's fiscal issues in the short run. The problem that we have, and I'm going from an economics point of view, I will not, unlike an accountant, speak to the numbers tonight. Economics is a behavioral science. Dismal, but behavioral in nature. And if you study the kind of behavior that's going on in society right now, in the short term, government, it is very clear government does not have the administrative resources or cost resources to manage the implementation of many of these taxes. I mean, tomorrow the Minister of Finance could easily go and announce, because I saw you were talking about next budget, Andrew, and I don't want to say he was foreshadowing something, but he could easily implement many of these short-term measures, and I can guarantee you might get a nice upswing at the end of the fiscal year because it's just numerical, But going into the next fiscal year, behaviors will ensue. You'll find people, for instance, who will, you actually did not even mention this in your presentation, that there was a consideration for charging VAT on the sale of new properties, which to me is the most asinine and stupid suggestion the IMF could really make. No, it's really asinine. The reason being, most of the taxes that are being considered there are considered on consumptive resources. Barbados is 80% consumption driven. Therefore, it is one would think if you can broaden the tax base on consumptive items, that you would get more revenue. Quite simple mathematics, correct? Perfect. The problem goes into the realm of investment, which is down the 15% region or whatnot. People view real estate as an investment good, not a consumptive good. The IMF also made reference, for example, to the fact that it was well implemented in markets or countries like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, all of which have very highly liquid real estate markets. And as an example, you could treat a house like how you treat food. You have easy access to finance. You could essentially pass on the cost that you inherited by the VAT to the next person. Remember, the VAT is supposed to affect the end user. So by implementing a structure like that, or rather considering it in the medium term, is asinine. It could essentially cause the housing market here in the middle class to freeze. Okay? So I would think, I won't spend all night talking about it, but most of these taxes have to be taken under serious consideration. It's not a numbers game. Most of the recommendations are, and I made a mistake earlier, so whoever got me on camera could cut that bit out. These taxes are very pro-cyclical, meaning they only can truly benefit the government on the upswing. The true problem in government right now is interest costs. And when you deal with that, or you can bring a recommendation to the fore in managing interest costs, then see me again.
That you can take small island developing state and compare it with Canada and Australia and saying those are the people who we should be looking at. So does our structure need reform? Absolutely. Can we drive towards greater equity, transparency and clarity? Without a doubt. I think that many of us in here know that there's just too many little things you have to be doing, and it's just burdensome. I think that if the proposals are put in place, they have a very, very high chance of achieving a tremendous windfall in the short term. But as a businessman, for the medium and long-term deal, it will absolutely, I think, in total, kill the drive that you have to move yourself out of where you're going. And I think that the reasons are simple. It's just not on the corporate level. But if you yourself are being burdened on a personal level more and more, where is your drive to move your business forward? And this is where an economy and the human beings start to merge. How do I feel about pushing in my effort to work more when more and more is being taken out? As a human being, your reaction tends to be you get down and you don't drive your way forward. I have not noticed anything in the report which also speaks of what incentive will you give? How do you stimulate? So the concern that I have is that even if you were to consider the wide range of the applications by the IMF as a way forward, you will have to understand that it has to be very, very carefully timed. That you achieve your short-term windfall, and very quickly after that, you have to apply the stimulating measures back into the economy. I think they realize that in some ways that they can't do everything and then just kill it and say, well, that's what it is forever. I also wanted to just, in closing, just say, when I look at these kinds of reports, I also understand that people tend to look at a sectoral view. I would have loved to have seen the IMF also comment on what the Auditor General speaks about. How do you plug the holes of the revenue that you are collecting? Now, you can't say that you have collected this money but yet somehow magically $300 million goes away. And I think that those are the systemic views that we have to look at. Even if we were to collect the $100 billion more or the $500 million more, what guarantee do we have that $2 or $3 or $4 or $500 million or all of it won't disappear into the ether? And that is not necessarily through spending. It is just through an inefficient process that reallocates the assets of government in the wrong places. So for us, and as a businessman, my concern is even as we tamper or as we seek to change, which we do need to do, we also need to take a system view of all of the things we need to do. We have the capacity as a nation to get it all done. We don't have to work A, then B, then C. We are people who can do many things at once, and I think that is what the advocacy that you would have is. Thank you.